Welcome back, everyone. Today I am testing my skills on what I remember about sourdough. I weigh out my ingredients, especially when making sourdough. It's usually recommended when you're baking anyhow, but usually I only weigh my ingredients with sourdough. So we're going to start off with 60 grams of active starter. My starter looked really good, and so I was really pleased to see how active it was looking. I overshot my ingredients a little bit, which is fine, so I'm going to remove a little bit. And I'm going to add 350 grams of filtered water, going slowly because we want to make sure we can add more, but we may not always be able to take away certain ingredients. So going kind of slow is always recommended. We will be also measuring out 500 grams of all-purpose unbleached flour and 9 grams of sea salt, kosher salt, any salt but your iodized salt. If that's all you have, then I recommend not using as much because it does tend to lend a more saltier flavor. So we are going to get this all mixed up. Now I'm going to tell you now, while I'm measuring out the flour here, somewhere I lost the footage of me actually going through the steps of cooking, baking this process. So basically when we get there, just know as I'm pulling it out of the oven, basically what I had to do is cook it with the lid on for so long, lid off for so long, and then I put it directly on the rack, and that's when you see me taking it out. So as we mix this dough, I like to use my whisk here. The Swedish dough whisk is really recommended, especially for something like this. It's going to be a very sticky dough. This is a very hydrated dough. To the 500 grams of flour, we added 350 grams of water. So it's a very hydrated dough. So of course you're going to see me struggle with it. It's very wet and sticky, and that's how it's supposed to be. And we're not really looking to get an actual uniform dough ball here. We're just trying to get it pretty much all cohesive. It's going to be very shaggy dough, however. And we're going to let it sit here for 30 to 45 minutes. And then this is the first time we're going to be doing the stretch and fold. The stretch and fold technique is in place of kneading like you would in a regular yeast type of bread. The stretch and folds work to work the gluten just enough to try and form a cohesive dough ball. You see how sticky that is? Each time we do a stretch and fold, it does get less sticky. So I recommend keeping some water on the side, and that will help to keep it from sticking to you as much. So we're going to stretch each side, pull it towards you, and then fold it away from you. And you're going to essentially turn your dough ball and do that 4 times. So 1 on each side. Now this was so sticky that I decided not to actually turn the dough ball, and I did it in its place. So each side, even though it's a circle, just essentially each side you're going to pull and tuck over. And as we do that, it helps to form an actual dough ball. And we're going to get it back into our bowl where it's going to rest for another 30 to 45 minutes. Now make sure you cover it with a wet tea towel or plastic wrap is fine. Now you'll notice how much it had risen. It looks phenomenal. And I didn't realize it. At the time I knew it had grown, but once I edited this video, I realized exactly how much it actually did grow. It looks fantastic. I'm really excited to see that. Now I do have a sourdough basket that I proof overnight or whatever the extended rest time is, I like to use this. You can just use a bowl. Just make sure you flour something. And I would put a tea towel in there just to make it easier to then remove it for the next day. So I'm flouring this very, very, very generously because I don't want anything to stick when I go to transfer it into my pot for cooking. I'm going to flour my surface really well. There are recipes where it makes you, or suggest rather, that you continue using the water. The recipe I tried after this one and that's what I did. I used the water, and I do recommend that, especially with a more hydrated type of dough like this. You do run the risk of adding too much flour. So use both techniques and see what you're comfortable with. So we are going to do another stretch and fold here. And this is basically the last stretch and fold for this particular recipe, which I did find a little curious because in the past I've recalled doing the stretch and fold quite a few times actually. This is considered a beginner's recipe, something that's supposed to be very simple and easy, and I'm wondering if maybe that's not why, because it only had us do the stretch and fold twice. So I do know that this recipe compared to the next one that I'm going to show you, there is quite a big difference between my loaves. This recipe doesn't use as much starter either, so maybe that's why it didn't grow as big. I'm not sure, but that's why it always pays to do multiple type of recipes to see which technique you're comfortable with and where you get the best results from. This was still really fantastic though. Absolutely no complaints. So now I'm trying to kind of figure out how on earth I'm going to get everything into this bowl, but I had to step away for a few minutes. And so when you do, I recommend covering, your dough. You don't want any, flies or anything getting on it, but you don't want it to dry out either. So I did have to step away, but when I came back, then I just pretty much tried to pull it up away and into the basket where it's going to proof anywhere from 4 to 9 hours. This one is going to sit on the countertop. This is not a refrigerator method because it won't be sitting overnight. I let this rest for, I believe, every bit of 4 to 5 hours. And instead of using plastic wrap, I decided to use a dry towel with flour because I didn't want anything sticking to it. Again, this is a very hydrated dough, and I just knew if it had risen anymore and I used the plastic wrap, it would be such a struggle to get it off. This is where I'm taking it out of the oven. Again, I did start it in my Dutch oven there. 30 minutes with the lid on, 20 minutes lid off, and then 10 minutes I used straight on this rack here in the oven. I'm doing the tap test to see, if it sounds like it's done. I could pretty much assume that it is after cooking for about an hour. This came out beautiful. It really did. What I noticed about this bread, because it being so hydrated, scoring the top and trying to make a design with my lame was incredibly difficult. So that might be something that I have to work on. I didn't have that with the recipe I used after this one, but it still looks so amazing. So I hope I will see you again the next time I'm in my kitchen. And for a little while, Sundays will be sourdough Sundays. So I will share the next recipe with you next Sunday. Thanks for watching.